This video is going to focus on the three major types of volcanoes that we see on our planet: shield volcanoes, cinder cones, and composite volcanoes. We're going to start off with shield volcanoes, which are these kind of really wide, relatively flat volcanoes. And I remember them because they look like Captain America's shield if he were to lay it down on the ground. And we see that most of the shield volcanoes form from accumulation from multiple eruptions of that really fluid basaltic lava. The one that's really hot, really dense because it's full of metals, and it flows similarly like water. So it's going to cover a really wide area, but have very gently sloping sides to it, just like a shield. And we see that most shield volcanoes actually begin as seamounts. And seamounts are just undersea mountains. But after eruption, these seamounts grew in size until they broke above the surface of the ocean, and then we call them a shield volcano. And this makes up all of the Hawaiian Islands. So all of the 5 major islands are actually just shield volcanoes. And one of those is Mauna Loa, which is the world's largest shield volcano. It's over 6 miles high, and it's incredibly wide, with really low, gently sloping sides. And towards the center of this shield volcano, we see that there is a massive, really well-developed caldera, or center, where it's collapsed inward from a previous eruption. And near Mauna Loa, we have Kilauea, which is one that we talked about earlier in this chapter, the one that has been continuously erupting since the 1980s. With this, we see that the magma chamber is going to cause the volcano to inflate. And as it's inflating, it's going to slowly break apart and move, causing earthquakes to swarm and happen in very frequent occasions right before the eruption begins. But overall, these shield volcanoes, because it's basaltic lava, they're really gentle and quiet. Like we can see in the center image, you can simply stand nearby. You don't want to touch the lava, but otherwise it's generally safe to be around. On the other hand, we can have our second type of volcano, which is called a cinder cone. And if you look at the image, it looks totally different from the shield volcanoes that we talked about before. These cinder cones are going to be really steep-sided, and they're going to be symmetrical. We're going to see that they have really deep, well-developed craters. And if we look at the sides of the volcano, they're going to be made out of these loose layers of scoria, that vesicular or holy volcanic rock that's full of air holes. So it's basically like a giant pile of gravel, like we can see when we drive down I-4. But cinder cones are really unique. These are the only type of volcanoes that generally form from a single eruption. The other 2 types we're going to see develop when we have multiple eruptions. But cinder cones only need 1 eruption, and generally they're fairly quick eruptions that take less than a month from start to finish. So we call these quickly forming because, again, we have volcanoes like Kilauea that have been erupting for over 40 years. And compared to the other 2, these are also the smallest volcanoes, where they're less than 1,000 feet high. Our third and final type of volcano is called a composite volcano. And these used to be called stratovolcanoes. And these are incredibly large, very symmetrical cones. And it's what I think of when I think of a volcano. We generally find these in one specific location of our planet, the Ring of Fire, the area around the Pacific Ocean where lots of subduction and therefore volcanoes are happening. And what makes these composite volcanoes unique is because they're built from multiple eruptions, where each eruption is going to lay down a layer of lava that will eventually be covered with the ash that will settle down on top of it. So over multiple eruptions, we're going to have multiple layers of alternating lava flow and ash above it. But because these composite volcanoes form around subduction zones, we're going to see that it primarily produces that intermediate or andesitic magma. It's going to be in between felsic and mafic. But these composite volcanoes are the most explosive and the deadliest volcanoes we have on our planet. Because they're so explosive, there is a lot of pyroclastic material that develops when it's erupting.